Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are here today to review another recovery shoe because that's the missing piece to my puzzle of my running shoe rotation. I'm going to be reviewing a shoe based on recommendations from a few of you. The Glycerin Max by Brooks. So this is the first iteration of the Glycerin Max. I got a really good deal on this because they are coming out with the Glycerin Max 2. I am looking forward to being able to review that one as well and then compare the two because I think that would be very helpful to see how they differ, especially because these are on sale right now. If you really liked these, snag them up because they're selling out. It was very hard to find this in my size. I probably could have been patient and waited for the second iteration. I wanted to give this one a try. As you may know, I am not always the biggest fan of heavier shoes, but we are growing, we are learning, we are branching out of our comfort zones because they all serve different purposes depending on what you're using them for. And a recovery shoe is naturally going to be a little heavier. Why I'm excited to try this shoe in particular, based on several people's recommendations, is because this shoe has a little bit of a better, stronger rocker here, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, which I think was the issue that I had with the Nike Vomero Premium that I recently reviewed, where I felt a little bit of a dragging sensation when I was running. I felt that I wasn't getting that good toe off, that good rotation with my form. And of course, yes, it was a heavier shoe, as is this, but I think that there were a few moving pieces that were contributing to those issues that I was experiencing. Hopefully, the rocker here will alleviate some of that and make this a better experience across the board. Though I did really like the premiums. I just had a hard time with a little bit of the heavier weight and then also, like I said, the dragging sensation. The price point for the shoe is $200 US, but due to the fact that it is not a new shoe, and yes, I'm sorry I'm late to the game. Some of you have probably already experienced it. Most of you have probably already experienced this if you were interested in trying a shoe in this category, but you can get it on sale right now for like $150 US. So that's what I got these for, which was pretty exciting for me, but for the sake of reviewing purposes, we will process that as if it were $200 US. That is what the price point is going to be for the second iteration that's coming out. So there isn't a change there, which I'm excited about. I know sometimes shoes will jump up $5, $10, sometimes $15, depending on the next iteration and some of the changes they've made with it. So that makes me hopeful that it's probably going to be relatively similar to this with some minor adjustments since this was their first go at it. It does come in men's and women's. I have the women's US size 7. I did weigh this at 8.8 ounces. Now the weight for women's is classified as 9.5 ounces and the men's is 10.5 ounces. It doesn't say which size that is, but based on this being just shy of 9 ounces, I would imagine it's probably the standard US women's 8 is what they base it off of. That's pretty typical from my experience that that's what they use for women's. I'm happy this is just shy of 9 ounces because that's a little bit closer to what I'm most comfortable in on a regular basis. But again, as I'm hoping to be transitioning into some marathon training here soon, I'm going to need some shoes that can really take me the distance. We're not always for pace, okay? We are also going to be working hard to make sure that we can rack up some miles and test myself for longevity, if you will, since the longest run I've ever done is just over a half marathon. Hopefully this is a good fit to carry me on to some of those upwards of 20 miles. We'll see. This is, of course, as the name says, it is a max cushion shoe. This is going to be good for daily running, but more specifically, it's going to be a potentially solid choice for people for recovery runs and overall long runs. The goal with some of these max cushion shoes is to be able to carry you a longer distance without having to take the brunt of the pain throughout your body. So your feet should be feeling relatively fresh and so should your legs. And I'm hopeful that this is also going to give me that fresh feeling afterwards so that I can go about my day pain-free. This does have their DNA-tuned midsole technology. What that means is there are larger cells in the heel of the shoe and transition into smaller cells to the forefoot of the shoe. The goal of that is to have optimal cushioning in the heel if you are striking with that mid and heel foot region, and then have a little bit more responsiveness as you work your way to the forefoot. If you look at it up close, we'll try and see if you can see it. You can kind of see it almost looks like little air bubbles in the foam. It's really interesting here. This is a pretty cool looking shoe. For it being a max cushion shoe, I don't feel that this looks overly aggressive. Of course, there is a lot of foam, does have a higher stack height, but in general, it doesn't seem to be too bulky, which I'm a fan of because I just feel that that can be a little bit of a limiting factor for me when I am running, especially those long runs, when you start to fatigue and you really need to be able to continue to have that strong turnover. But again, like I said, with this rocker here, this does have the glide roll technology. So this is supposed to be a really seamless transition as you are moving through your striking pattern to have that more seamless toe off. I will let you know how I feel during it. I'm pretty pumped though, because between that rocker, a little bit lighter weight than the Vomero Premium, and also we have a 6mm heel drop, which is right in the realm of what I like. I think I'm going to have an okay experience. I don't want to jinx it because anything can happen, but in general, and I think this is the reason that some people were recommending this shoe for me, was because I was hoping to have something below that 10mm drop. The 10mm drop's just a little too much for me. I tend to lean into that heel striking a tiny bit more than I'm comfortable with. Not really make or break, but that's not my normal striking pattern. So I really want to make sure that the shoe is really conducive to how I would run in any given situation. This does have a triple layer engineered mesh upper. It does tend to feel a little thicker than what the most of the mesh uppers that I've experienced are. I mean, throughout the rest of the shoe, it seems to carry kind of a very even distribution of material. Obviously, it thickens a little bit towards the back, which I would anticipate, but I don't feel that the shoe overall is going to be overly warm compared to some other shoes I have experienced. I do feel that I wish this was maybe a tiny bit thinner up in the forefoot, because I do find that this region can help balance my body temperature out a tiny bit if there is more material in the heel, which with some of these max cushion shoes, that is the case. And this one, a little bit less than the Vomero Premium. It's pretty structured overall. The heel color is interesting because it's pretty sturdy down at the bottom, and you can feel on the inside where the foam starts to go from very minimal to a little bit more as it goes up. And then it comes out to this kind of interesting flap type situation here. I don't know what we would want to call this, but essentially it is like a heel color flap. I don't think I'll have issues with this just from my initial perspective, but it is something I'm not used to. It is quite different than most shoes I've ever tried, so we'll see how that ends up feeling as I get into it. Now, this is not a stability shoe, it is a neutral shoe. However, the outsole of this shoe is a pretty solid foundation. They definitely did not skimp out here in terms of material. That's pretty standard from what I've been seeing with more of these recovery, daily trainer, longer distance max cushion shoes. I think that this will be a pretty good experience overall without having any stability concerns. This grippage is looking real sharp here, okay? I think there is going to be no issues with slippage, which I'm not typically concerned about, but something I like to point out, they did a really good job with what appears to be some solid technology with traction control. All right, everyone, now's the time to take this shoe out for a run and see how it performs. We will probably do about 5 miles. The shoe and I will probably do about 5 miles and then stay below an 8-minute pace. That's my goal today. I'm actually going to try something a little different than I usually do. I may be crazy because I find this so hard to do. I listen to music when I run. It's what pumps me up. It's what propels me forward. Thunderstruck in particular, as you may know. If you know, you know. But I'm going to do an audiobook for this recovery run. I'm trying to rack up some final books before the end of the year to hit my goal. And I think an audiobook is what I need to run at that slower pace range. I'll let you know how that goes. I may quit not quit the run, but I may quit the audiobook halfway through and switch to music, but stay tuned. I'll report back on if this is a Thunderstruck shoe and what my overall thoughts are. All right, everybody, I am back from my run. I have a lot to say about these shoes, and I will say this daylight savings time issue, it's not doing the lighting justice in here, okay? I'll have to get my production team to update the overall aesthetic and vibe in here to accommodate. Just kidding. Obviously, it's just me doing this whole shebang. Let's chat about the Glycerin Max and what my thoughts were from this run. I will say I have mixed thoughts, okay? Not too abnormal for me. I am very particular, but that's because I really, really want to kind of give you a very thorough overview of how the shoe worked for me. So everything from fit, feel, function, all the F's, okay? Look at that. Fit, feel, and function, and just to really tell you every minor detail, because all of that is so important when you're making a decision on your shoe. Now, it will be different person to person. Take it with a grain of salt, as you may already be doing. Initial thoughts of putting this shoe on, it did feel pretty comfortable. There were some minor things that I was noticing with this that I do want to call out. First and foremost, these laces, guys. They are long. I double knotted the shoe, as you should when you're running, and I still had so much excess shoelace. I mean, I had spoken before in one of my former reviews. I'm blanking on which shoe it was, but one of those laces were very, very short. So it was just kind of like this extreme opposite end of the spectrum for me. There was just too much going on. Now, it doesn't impact anything. No complaints. That's not going to deter me from giving it any ratings. I did have to adjust the laces a couple times to really figure out what worked best for me in terms of the overall comfort. The upper of the shoe, it felt sort of claustrophobic. Now, that sounds extreme, so let me just explain a little bit more. But I think, as I mentioned earlier on, this material feels a little thicker, not as breathable, which I do still stand by after running in it. But I just felt like it just kind of sucked onto my foot. Like if you've run in the Brooks Glycerin Max 3s, that's a good comparison of what it felt like it was trying to fit like in terms of the compressive kind of sock-like feeling. But for a material like this I don't feel should have that same fit. I didn't love that. I feel like it was leading to a tiny bit of compression in the toe box region here. Now, from my experience, Brooks does tend to run a little bit more on the narrow side for their shoes. I don't know. I mean, I haven't run in enough Brooks to really speak of if all shoes do. I mean, you can tell from looking at this that this toe box is a little bit on the more narrow side. So I think a combination of the overall structure being a little bit more narrow, but then also the material, I felt I was a tad restricted. If you do lean in the wider foot direction, I would caution you on this. I think you're not going to be the most comfortable out of the gate. And usually if you step into a shoe and you notice that, that's not going to go away while running. If anything, it's going to become more noticeable and probably more aggravating as you get into your run. Another thing that I briefly mentioned in the beginning about the heel collar was it's almost as if this bottom part here is very, very firm and there's no extra foam material. And then it almost like has a ridge where it protrudes out just ever so slightly before you get to this top part here. I will try my best to show you. Okay, yes, you can kind of see that in there. So as you can see the protrusion out right through here, that's what I'm referencing when I'm talking about this. Now, when I put that on, initially I was concerned I was not going to like that. I did not think it would bother me from looking at it, but putting it on, I could notice that differential between the lack of foam and then the foam and where that started to rub against my Achilles/heel area. Now, as I got into my run, it didn't bother me whatsoever. I think sometimes you can have things feel sort of unusual as long as they're not going to be uncomfortable or painful when you actually are running. I did find this to be true to size in length, but err on the side of caution if you do tend to have a wider foot. During this run, I did stick to 5 miles and my pace range was between an 8:25 and an 8:55-ish. So I really tried to lean into that zone 2 recovery run. Now let me say, I had no issues with keeping that more recovery pace while listening to my audiobook. I mean, I don't want it to sound like I'm knocking people who enjoy audiobooks or podcasts while running. I just don't. I love reading. I need music to hype me up, pump me up, and keep me going. Now for a run that's more of that recovery pace, well, don't probably want to be listening to Thunderstruck because that's going to get me going. So honestly, this was a good change of pace for me. I did find though, interestingly enough, that it was a little harder to focus and pay attention to my run. So I really had to lock in and almost distract myself a little bit from my book. So probably shouldn't have even been listening to it. I did notice that the upper was a little too snug for my liking. As I said, it felt a little claustrophobic, but more so that there seemed to be some rubbing, primarily on my left foot, honestly, but my left foot tends to have a little bit more issues than my right. Historically speaking, I unfortunately have developed a very small bunion on my left foot just from overuse, overexertion, some snug shoes, probably a combination of all the things. Maybe the high heels I used to wear in college, walking miles at a time, who knows? Regardless, we're rolling with it because it's not that bad, but more or less that it is just a tiny bit more sensitive. And I did find that this shoe wasn't the most conducive for that. Something I want to caution people on when trying new shoes in general, because I've been someone who has done this in the past, is really give a shoe a chance. Now, one run in most cases isn't enough to give a shoe a chance. Quite frankly, several runs is when you're really going to understand better how a shoe is going to work for you. There's, sometimes just depending on the shoe, there just can be more of a break-in period for some. As I spoke of in my Mega Blast review, one of my first reviews, I did not love that shoe out of the gate. However, I was told by multiple people that it got better over time. That was an interesting shoe where people either loved it or hated it, but the people who loved it spoke of it took like a few dozen miles before that shoe really came to life. So all that being said, I do firmly believe your first run gives you a pretty solid baseline of what to expect long term. Don't make your final decisions based off of one run unless it is horrific, okay? Because there are shoes that they just don't work for people, and that's okay. I do feel that the shoe did a really good job in that recovery pace range for me, but as I started to progress my run, I did slowly increase my speed, and it did really come to life even at those faster speeds, despite it being a heavier shoe and more of that daily kind of easy miles trainer. Again, the foam composition and the rocker technology here, I think, was a really solid combination. And it did have that responsiveness that they said that it would. And I was pleasantly surprised with that. Enough of the overview and my initial thoughts. Let's go ahead and dive into my ratings for what my thoughts are on the Glycerin Max Comfort. Now, this is one that, as I sort of alluded to earlier, did evolve as I was running. I am going to give this an 8.1. It's not my highest, but it's not my lowest in terms of comfort. I felt that this shoe had a lot of cushioning. The foam was solid overall, but due to it being a more snug upper, the material was not the most breathable. The heel color was a little wonky for me. I don't feel like it's just my favorite shoe for comfort purposes. It did feel good as I was running, and I did notice that I didn't have any ailments or discomforts after the run. I felt relatively refreshed, not quite as refreshed as I did after the Nike Vomero Premiums, but that doesn't surprise me. I mean, that is a premium shoe. So feeling extremely refreshed after that kind of makes sense. The foam part of it more than anything is debatably the most important part for being able to feel comfortable on your runs. And I felt like that was the best of all of those things I just mentioned. However, I will say some of this foam technology, I think, due to it being created to have a little bit of that more responsive feel, it felt a tad on the firm side. I mean, I may have some people disagree with me. I'm just speaking to how it felt for me. And I think that that's just kind of a trend that I've noticed with Brooks in general. Performance, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 9.0. This shoe, I feel, did a really, really good job with this foam technology to create that combination of having that foam to absorb the impact, but also to propel you forward. I think this is cool because this is something that people don't need to feel limited in those slower paces. You can pick up the pace. Of course, I think that this is still something that you would use primarily for a more everyday running, like long, easier miles versus a tempo run or something that you would naturally be going a tad faster, but it's not impossible. Quality. I'm also going to give this a 9.0. Now, I feel that this is a very durable shoe. The foam feels very solid here. The heel collar feels sturdy and stable. I don't think that this is going to be a shoe that's not going to last for quite a few miles. I think the only reason I'm docking the quality, and this is a little tough because it's not because it's poorly made. I just think that it is a little bit of a quality mistake, if you will, for a shoe that you would want to run a long distance in. And that's just the mesh upper here. I feel like the material could have been chosen a little bit more strategically, because the longer you run, the warmer you're going to get in most circumstances. And I think that having more breathability here with this would be a solid component. And then also, just like I said, and I know this kind of can sometimes vary between comfort and quality, but I think that the design here being a little bit more narrow is just limiting its audience. I feel that that is sort of, I think kind of a quality issue. I don't know. I think you could probably throw it in any category, but I just feel that this isn't designed in a way that's going to be suitable for every runner. Price point. $200 is pretty spot on for the average longer kind of recovery shoe. In a lot of the different shoe brands that I have been seeing, they pretty much range from $180 to like $220. I mean, the Vomero Premiums, which I did review recently, those were up to $230, but that is like a beast of a shoe. I still felt like that was overpriced, but needless to say, there's quite a range here, and this falls pretty true to kind of everything that I've noticed. I mean, I would be curious if anyone has found a more long run recovery max cushion shoe that is like $150, $160, but I feel like that's super hard to come by for any shoe nowadays. That being said, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 9.5. I mean, of course, would I like it to be under $200? Yes, but I'm really trying to look at it from the lens of comparing it to other competitors in its realm. And it's a competitive shoe price. It's not underpriced, it's not overpriced. Getting this for $150 for the sake of trying this out from me, I mean, that to me is a 10 out of 10. But of course, that's because it is on sale since the new one's coming. So if you do want to try this shoe, get it now if you can find your size, because it is $150 US. All of that being said, is this a Thunderstruck shoe? This is a tough one for me, but all in all, I'm going to have to say no, it's not a Thunderstruck shoe. There were a lot of things that I really did like about this shoe, but the biggest kicker for me was just the snugness that I felt that was bothering my left foot in particular the more I ran. Now, because of that, I won't be able to run in it regularly, comfortably. And I think that that's just kind of a bummer. I don't want to deter people from this shoe, because I do feel that there's a lot of solid elements to this. I just want to reiterate that if I'm having something bother me and cause me pain, it's just probably not going to be a shoe for me. I would still say give it a try for the price point, $150. You really can't beat that for this shoe. I really wanted to love this shoe. I'm super curious of the second iteration, what adjustments they're going to make. I'll do some research on that, but hopefully there's a few minor adjustments that will kind of make this a win for the average person. And really stemming from the toe box adjustments, weight wasn't terrible. I mean, it was heavier, of course, but it wasn't impacting my stride, my turnover. The ratings weren't bad. Everything I said was very honest and true. I think that this could be a great shoe for a lot of people. I just don't want to be in pain when I run, especially a lot of miles. So, all right, that does it for another week of shoe reviews with me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm always on the hunt for the newest or oldest, really, because this is not new, shoe that will kind of do all the different things. I am still really looking for a recovery shoe. This didn't quite fit the bill for me. Something out there I'm sure will. Drop your comments if you have anything that you truly loved. What worked for you may not work for me, and vice versa, but that's okay. I'm still willing to give it a try. You never know. Until next time, see you all soon. Thanks for tuning in.